Hey everyone, Kelsey Goodwin here of K Good Photo. Really excited to be back again judging the Victoria Camera Club competition this year. It's a really fun volunteer gig and it allows me to see amazing photos locally done in several different categories. So I thought that I might as well do this judging live so that everyone who entered can get a better idea of what they're looking for and kind of get a better idea how to improve their art as well. So we are starting with the advanced open print category. Each photo will be judged out of 20 from these 4 categories. 6 points for light and exposure, 2 points for sharpness, 6 points again for composition and design, and 6 points for mood and impact. Let's get started. The first image is titled At the Ironman Starting Line. It's in the open category. I won't be saying names of the authors during this, but we're just going to admire what's going on here. So the first thing I'm noticing, of course, is the mood that I'm feeling. I feel really excited for this person. She's smiling, she looks excited. I have no idea why. That's exactly not the face that I would have before an Ironman, but she's obviously feeling very prepared, and you can relate to her. It's a very empathetic image, and I like that. And it's really nicely framed. That's a really great compositional element, is using existing things in your foreground to frame your image a little bit better. So I really like that element. If I were to say some things that could help the composition in this area would be to move her either in camera or crop it in post-production so that her face is actually more in the rule of thirds, which would be right around here. For those of you interested in learning more about the rule of thirds, there's actually a way deeper and really cool story behind that. It's called the Fibonacci spiral, and it's actually a magical number found in all things beautiful in nature. So if we moved her face just a little bit there, I think it would be more on line with the rule of thirds, and that would draw me in a little bit more into our subject right here. So we've gone over a little bit about mood and impact, which I really enjoy. So I'm going to give this print a 5 out of 6 for that. Composition design, really well done. Just a touch over that way if I had to say something. Again, I'll give that a 5 out of 6. For the sharpness, it looks to be a little bit soft right on the lip here. If I were to pick a sharpness point, I would say probably right there on those drops. It could also be because they have specular highlights, which tend to make a more contrasty portion of the image look sharper, even though it's not. The paper is also a little bit more like reflective, so that could have something to do with it. I'll give that a 2, because it's definitely not soft. And then finally, the treatment of the image. Treatment is a word I use to refer to the post-processing in Lightroom and Photoshop. For this, overall, I love the tones, love the color. I think it's a little bit dark, which is funny coming from me because I love dark and moody images, but I find that my eye doesn't gravitate towards her as much as I would hope it would. Our eyes gravitate to the area of most contrast. So if it was just a little bit brighter around her face here, then your eye would go straight to that. And that's what I would love to see, just a little bit more. So with that, I will give it a 5. Which makes this total print score 17 out of 20. Yay! Okay. For anyone who's just tuned in, this is Kelsey Goodwin doing live judging for the Victoria Camera Club competition. Featuring lots of amazing local photographers. It's really cool to see their stuff every year, and this is actually the advanced category. So everyone in this category are seasoned competitors. The next one is called Going Fishing. Cool. Right on. Okay, the first thing I'm drawn into is this beautiful reflection down here. And I love that they've kind of given that a lot of breathing room. A lot of times you see just a hint of the reflection, like if it was matted right there, and you'd be wishing for them to just like take it down a little bit. But here I don't have that need. I'm really satisfied with that. pretty sharp as well. And they've chosen a really glossy, kind of like almost metallic-y image, like paper, which kind of fits nicely with the reflection choice here. I'm sideways. Oh, I just realized I was sideways. Thank you, Miriam. Wait, hold on. I'm using my iPad here. I might have to move this over a little bit. There we go. Cool. Thank you. All right, let's see. So we've got a lot of red popping here. So let's look at the light and exposure first. I see a lot of light. It's really good. And you can see by the dark shadows here that they're actually shooting in a really harsh sunny day environment, which is actually the hardest light to work with because it's so unwieldy, especially for portraits, but not so much for detail stuff like this. So I really like how that's helping the color pop quite a bit. So for light and exposure, I'm giving that a 6 out of 6. And sharpness looks pretty bang on to me, so I'm going to give that a 2 out of 2. Composition design, I really love, again, like how this is separated between the reflection and this up here. I'm a big fan personally of shooting wide open, but I respect the author's intention with getting everything behind it in detail as well. I think that kind of creates, you know, more of like a messy, beautiful result. So I am going to give this a 6 out of 6 for composition and design. And the mood and impact. When you look at this, I'm not quite sure what the message is, but it makes me feel happy. You know, I like round, bright things with the reflection on a sunny day. I might put this in my salon if I had one. So I will give that a 6 out of 6 as well. And then finally, for the treatment, down here you see we have a really bright spot from that like sunlight that's hitting that part. And you'd think that these bright specular highlights on these shiny objects would also be found up here. But it looks like these things are actually not as bright as these, or it was intentionally kind of burned down a little bit. And when I say burning, I mean darkened a little bit in post-production. So I think that they actually did do something intentional back in here. And this might have been a lot brighter. It looks like it might have been toned down slightly, so I could appreciate that. So I'm going to give that a full mark for 20 out of 20. Woohoo! Nice. All right, next print. This one is called coupling. It's called coupling. This is why I love the open category, because you just never know what you're gonna get. It could be a portrait, it could be a pipe, you know, same thing. So what do we got here? We have focus on something you wouldn't generally notice, kind of like a still life type of category. The impression that I get is something that's kind of been abandoned. This looks a little off kilter and needs some maintenance. There's some like mildew things going on. The screw is much too long for that scenario. So the impression I get is something that's kind of longing or forgotten. When I look at it, I feel like I get the message all in one go. I don't feel the need to look at it again to kind of learn more of a story. So the impact is more of like a what you see is what you get kind of minimal approach. I appreciate that for sure. But I'm going to give that a 5 out of 6 for impact. And composition and design. I like that they're nice and straight. I'm not sure if that was done in post-production to straighten those lines out afterwards or if that was done in camera. And the design is quite nice. They could have centered this, and that would have been a nice symmetry look as well, but they also decided to go for a bit more room on this side, like an intentional crop. I like things that look really intentional. So for composition and design, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 6. The reason I'm not giving it a 6 out of 6 is because I like, you get more of a wow factor when you see a photographer really push themselves. and really try to find things that are going to convey an emotion or a message. And for me, as much as I am getting a feeling of like forgottenness from this, if the treatment kind of came in and made it more foreboding to add to that forgotten feeling, or just kind of had more of a story to it, then I would give it more for the design aspect. Sharpness, it's very sharp. Technically perfect. You can see every little fleck. So 2 out of 2 for sharpness, and the exposure is perfect. Light and exposure, really nice. So 6 out of 6 for that. So 17 out of 20. Good job, the author of Coupling. All right, next image. All right, this one is called Montefabri for sale. I think that might be a different language. Again, this is from the Victoria Camera Club's Advanced Open category. You guys are seeing a little bit of a sheen here. I'll just angle it like that a little bit. Also, for those watching, please feel free to ask any questions if you like. So right away, whenever I see lines like architecture, doors and windows, and other frames like that, I'm looking for non-distortion and straight lines for technical accuracy. So here I'm saying that these lines are very straight. This line here isn't straight, but that's okay because I think it's the shelf isn't quite attached properly, and it kind of adds to the character of what we're looking at here. But these lines are nice and straight, and this ground is really straight, really nice. This little sign in the window says Vendis, and then it says something else. I think that might be French for like for sale, which kind of goes with the caption, which is really cool. Makes you wonder about like what it is and who's gonna buy it and where the heck this even is. It looks like Mexico or somewhere. I really love the colors. I love seeing all the texture here. Everything is super in focus, so you're really getting a sense of place, which is really cool. Also, I want to point out this really nice crop. So oftentimes when you see stuff like this, you don't get a floor. They crop it right there. Nothing wrong with that, but I find a more effective way to present a scene is to show just a little bit of the ground underneath where anyone is standing or whenever there's an object on the ground, because then you get a sense of place. You can see the whole image and you know exactly what's going down here. So just by having that small anchor at the bottom of your image is really going to help the viewer answer some questions they might have, even subconsciously without them realizing it. And this graffiti here, like going right down to that flower, is a really nice and leading line into one of the subjects of this image. So I'm really drawn in. I look at the image and I stare at this because it's centered and there's a line drawing to it, and then I go to the window, I look at the sign, it makes me curious about what's going on, and then I'm sweeping down here, checking out the succulents, checking out these exotic flowers, and then my eye comes back again. It has this really nice flow around the image, so it really draws me in. So I'm going to give that a 6 out of 6 for mood and impact. And I'm also going to give that a 6 for composition and design, because I really love how they've composed this photo. Sharpness is fully accurate, so that's getting a 2, and the light and exposure is perfect. And I think the treatment's really, really well done. They didn't do any, they didn't go overkill on warming it up or cooling it down. They just kind of let it speak for itself, which is really quite authentic and works well for this image. So, 20 out of 20. Nice work. All right, next photo. This one is entitled Mount Washington. I wonder where it could be. I'm curious about why this wasn't in the nature category, but I know that the Camera Club has made some changes to what defines a nature category exactly, so this could be one of those. So right away I'm looking at this and I'm wondering if they used a long compression lens, because it looks like the trees and mountains are directly stacked on top of each other, whereas if they used a wide angle, they wouldn't look so compressed. You might see some more distortion on the outsides of the image, as well as more spaces between the trees. So my guess is that the maker of this image was standing a little bit far away with a longer lens to really focus in on like how many of these trees are interacting with each other. The second thing I noticed is that everything's really crisp. Everything's really sharp. And it really does draw me in because you can see every tiny texture on the snow and a little bit on the trees and everything. The depth of field is very large. Only this small portion in the front is out of focus. So that's quite cool. But on the sharpness note, I would say I think it's a touch too sharp. So maybe a little bit over sharpened slightly. And the reason I say that is because the sky actually has noise. So unless the maker was shooting at a very high ISO, which is unlikely given these sunny 16 circumstances, I think the sharpening added noise to the sky, whereas you might not have intentionally wanted the noise to be present. So a little bit too sharp. So I'm going to give it a 1 out of 2 for sharpness, just to preserve the quality of the image in terms of smoothness. I really love the impact though. I think I could see this hanging in like, you know, everyone's ski lodge. It's a really fun image to look at if you're stuck inside. So I'm going to give that a 6 out of 6 for mood and impact. Composition and design, I really like it. My eye does tend to go down here as the brightest portion of the image, and I think it's supposed to bounce around, but it does follow these long shadows up into the frame and bounces up and down throughout the forest here. So I'm going to give that a 6 out of 6 for composition and design. And light and exposure is really well done. It can be difficult to get everything in the proper exposure. And when I say by proper exposure, I mean there's no information lost in the highlights and no information lost in the blacks. So there's no true whites and no true blacks in a proper exposure. So down here, even though this is the brightest part of the image, I'm still seeing a little bit of snow texture. So, which is really nice. Nothing's clipped or anything. So I'm going to give that a 6 out of 6. In terms of treatment. So this ends up with a 19 out of 20. Really good score from Mount Washington. Kind of makes me want to go skiing as well. This is the last photo from the open category before we move on to the monochrome and the nature ones. It's called, it's called Spectators. Great, so what we're seeing here is really pleasing compositional elements such as repetition. So you see this guy's head, then you see that silhouette, then you see that silhouette, then you see that silhouette. And they fall out of focus as they exit the depth of field that's in focus there. So that's really cool. I really like seeing that repetition there. And then it sweeps down, you look at this guy's face because he's the only one in focus, and then it sweeps down and you are guided to his hand in his cell phone there. So then you wonder, spectators, that title kind of like helps you understand the message that the maker of this image was trying to convey. So these guys are looking what's going on, this guy is not, he's looking at his cell phone. So what's the story here? Is it that we're looking too much at our phones when we should be looking at other things? Interesting, right? Why else would he choose to include this phone in the image? Especially in such a focal part of the photo. So mood impact, it does beg you to ask questions. I would like to see more of an expression on this guy, but at the same time, maybe the fact that he has no expression speaks to the message as well. So I am going to give it a 5 out of 6 for impact. Composition and design. Like I was saying before, the repetition of these silhouettes is pleasing, and the flow of his face to his cell phone is nice as well. I do have to say I would like him better if he was in the rule of thirds again. He's almost in the very center with his eyes, so it'd be nice if he moved this way. Because right now I'm kind of distracted by his ear a little bit. So I'm going to give that a 5 out of 6 for composition. The sharpness looks a little bit soft. I'm not really sure where the sharpest point is. It could be his ring and the phone down here, but that could also be because they're specular and shiny. I think maybe the maker of this photo potentially could have cropped in on a larger image, which could also make it look softer than it actually is. I'm going to give that a 2 because it's sharp enough for sure. Plus, it needs to be viewed actually from a distance of about here to really appreciate it. And that looks sharp to me from the viewing distance that's expected. Okay, so the treatment, though, I'm looking at a really blue image. And daylight happens to be very blue balanced, of course. But unless you wanted that kind of cold tone overall at the end of the final result, the maker could have been shooting this photo on like a daylight balance mode, but in the shade, so it's extra cold. They chose not to warm it up afterwards. Totally could be their creative call. But then you see a lot of red in his ear here, and the ear is something I keep going back to because it is so much redder than the rest of the photo, and because it's more in the rule of thirds than his face is here. And this guy's nose is also quite red as well, and this guy's nose is a bit red. I think this image could benefit from a little bit of warming as well as reduction of the red areas. Whenever I see a shirt like this that should be white and it's this blue, it just makes me want to warm it up a little bit, depending on the vibe of the photo. So for overall, I'm going to give this a 16 out of 20. Really good job. I really love the message. I want to hear more about this. All right, that ends the open category. Moving on to the nature category. Okay, for those of you who might have tuned in recently, I'm Kelsey Goodwin. This is live judging for the Victoria Camera Club's competition. Based on these categories, light and exposure, sharpness, composition and design, and mood and impact, I give each print a score out of 20. The title of this image is called Cattail. Very fitting because it's a cattail. Great, so the first thing that strikes me is this huge burst of texture right in the center. It's super sharp and you're seeing all the little detail of these things, these fibers that are hanging off this guy. Super shallow depth of field, shooting wide open at probably like 2.8 or 1.4. Potentially even lower depending how far away this was from the reeds behind it. Really let the focus fall exactly where the maker intended to fall. You know this is a very intentional image when you see a focus so directed. The light and exposure is really nicely done. You don't see any blown out highlights or anything. The light's coming back from behind rather than from the front, so it's really showcasing that texture as well as possible, which is really nice. Whenever you want to showcase texture, it's really great to light it from the side. When the sun goes down and lights things from the side, when the shadows are the longest, that's when you get the most detail. So really good decision on the time of day to photograph this object, and then the composition design of the image kind of leading you this way. It's cool. I like that it's tilted. It's probably naturally falling like that anyway. And the mood of the impact is nice. It's a really nice nature detail, so I'm going to give this a 20 out of 20. It's technically perfect. All right, next image. This one is titled with a question. It's, I have to swallow this? It looks like a herring and some kind of like bass or trout. I don't really know my fish, but pretty epic that he caught that right in there. Like I'll show you a close up because that's really impressive. Oh, here we go. Check out that detail. Like how long was that guy camping there to get this herring to like throw that guy up in his mouth? We may never know. So let's have a look at the impact of the image. Impact, of course, is like, whoa, this thing's about to go down. Literally. Very, very cool. So, I am going to give impact 6 out of 6. This is a wow image for me. Compositionally, we're kind of in the rule of thirds here with the eye, and then we kind of go back to this and go back to there. I like the framing of this image. You can see where the bird is standing, which is nice. He's not like being bisected or cut off at any joint that looks unnatural, which you see quite a bit as well. Hey Adam, I saw that you just joined in. You should be training right now. Anyway, so oftentimes you'll see some cropping happen, especially for people where you crop at the ankle or, you know, in the middle of your arm, things like that. That just looks unnatural. The point is to crop wherever an animal or a human will naturally bend, and that's what's not going to freak people out subconsciously. So I really like that the cropping did not happen here. All right, so composition design looks really nice. The wow factor is there for me. Sharpness, it looks quite sharp, but in the darker areas you can tell that there is some noise present, and I think that's because, thank you for the heart, that's wonderful. I think that's because this photograph was taken at nighttime. So the original image was probably quite darker than the resulting photo here. I can see maybe they've raised some shadows in here, so that's why it's created some of the noise. But you know what? I don't actually mind it too much. Sometimes that's the name of the game, and grain can be artistic, and sometimes it can't be. It all depends what your preference is. So I am going to give that a 2 out of 2. Light and exposure. Exposure is very well done. They've made some proper adjustments to get it up a little bit. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I'm pretty lucky. He's a nice guy. He's also a student in my photography class, so he's learning as well. All right, so I am going to give this image 20 out of 20. It's really well done, so the maker of this image should be very impressed themselves. All right, next shot. Just gonna get out of the plastic here. Thanks, Adam. You better be training right now. Okay, this one is called Anchorage in the advanced nature category. I'm also recording this with my phone over here so that the Victoria Camera Club can actually have a feed of all of my critique as well. So this is titled Anchorage, so it leads me to wonder if it was actually taken in Anchorage, Alaska, which I have been to at least one time, or where it was taken. It looks very West Coasty though. You've got that like West Coast kind of like flora and fauna happening. And the mountains are very rounded. So I'm not sure why it was titled Anchorage, but either way, I like it. I like that title. So when you look at this image, you get a sense of place and a sense of peace. I really like this photo. I could see it in a lot of different calming environments. The first thing I'm noticing is that down here is not in focus. So the reflection's not in focus, of course, because reflections tend to be a little bit fuzzy. But then I'm looking at these trees and the rocks, and it looks like it could be potentially some handshake. Or maybe the focus was thrown back farther. These mountains back here look more in focus to me than the front part here does. It could also be because this was cropped in from a much wider image, which can sometimes actually decrease the quality of a photo. When you punch in afterwards, you want to get it right in camera. Next time I would suggest putting it on a tripod if you're doing a bit of a longer exposure, or not running when taking the photo, which I'm sure you weren't, but just for everyone listening out there. So for sharpness, I am going to give it a 1. For composition design, I really like this. The horizon is straight, which you almost never see. And very, very important, so the world's not completely tilted. You want it to be straight so that you get a sense of place. Straight horizons are really important, and I really love seeing that. And then also we have some really beautiful framing with the rocks here. So my eye goes to these mountains right away, because that's being nicely framed. Then it goes down to the trees here, comes this way, and then it has another subject anchor my eye so that it comes right back. That's a sign of a really nice composition when you keep going back into the image. So I'm going to give that a 6 out of 6 for composition. The light and exposure I think is really well done. It's shot at a really beautiful time of day where you've got this beautiful kind of like pinky blue hour happening. And also the clouds up here are not blown out. You can see detail very nicely throughout the image. So the exposure is really well done. I'm giving that a 6 out of 6. 6 out of 6 again. So this image, Anchorage, gets 19 out of 20. Woo. So good job to the maker of this photo. All right, next print in the Victoria Camera Club Nature category. is titled Christie Falls. Ooh, I really like this. What do you guys think? Do you like this one? Is Christie Falls on the island? It must be because it looks super rainforesty, or maybe Vancouver area, something like that. Let's be honest, it's on the island, right? Because all the great places are on the island. Okay, so this image, right away, I love that it like kind of bisects this diagonally. You don't see that often, so when you can pull it off with something like this, like kudos. Really love the composition of how it cuts through the water there. So compositionally, I am going to give this a 6. And I think it has a really nice wow factor as well. So I'm going to give that a 6 out of 6 as well for mood and impact category. The number one thing I love about this image though is the intention of the maker when they chose their shutter speed. So I'm going to show you a little close up of what I mean by that. Check out the water without that glare there. Oh, there we go. See how the water kind of looks like silk? You can't see every water droplet by itself. And you get that effect with a tripod or extremely sturdy squatting skills with a camera and a little bit of a drag on your shutter. So this could be, depending on how dark it was in there, it could be a 60th of a second, it could be a 40th or a 30th of a second. These areas tend to be quite dark with lots of foliage, so I'm sure it was around that area, around those settings. I really love the effect that it created though, very mystical. And then they've got some kind of out of focus goboing in the foreground here, which is a nice framing element with a shallow kind of aperture as well. So I really like that. And the treatment looks really good. The exposure looks wonderful. It's a little bit dark in the shadows, but I'm not bothered by it because it's not a big chunk. The darkest place is this kind of cave here, but then it has this beautiful kind of highlight going through with the water, so I like that. It looks really nice. If I were to suggest a treatment, I would say darken this area down a little bit and brighten this area up a little bit to further add the focus into the middle. But I am going to give this a 20 out of 20 because I really like this image. It's technically accurate. I get a really good vibe from it, and I can see this hanging up in a commercial establishment. Good job. Okay. Only 2 prints left in the nature category for the Victoria Camera Club. This is live judging coming at you. This image is called Red-Winged Blackbird. I wonder what we're gonna see. What do you know? It's a red-winged blackbird. Cool. I don't know much about birds, but maybe this guy's super rare or something. He's got this like pretty epic red wing up there, which is cool. So right away, of course, I'm looking at the red wing. My eye goes to that, and then it goes to his face, and then it draws down here, and then it goes to the tail and back up again. So really nice composition. I like that they've centered it. At the same time though, whenever you have a subject, whether it be an animal or a human, or even something like a car that's moving in a certain direction or looking in a certain direction, sometimes it's worth experimenting to see what that would look like if you had more space on where the subject was looking. Because then it answers some questions that the viewer might subconsciously have about gaze empathy. It allows you to empathize with that subject and anticipate that they're looking towards this, or the empty space they're looking at, you can look where they're looking and then come back to them. Or you can do the opposite, because rules are meant to be broken, of course, and you have lots of space in behind them, and then it kind of creates this like jarring, none of your business type of situation. I still like that it's centered. It would have been interesting for the maker maybe later to experiment with adding some more space this way or some more space that way, depending on what they would like. So compositionally, I really like it. The mood and impact is good. This guy looks like he's freaking out at someone or something. And I know that wildlife is difficult to capture. It requires a lot of patience, and that might be why that I don't personally do it. Although weddings are very much like wildlife, so maybe I could say that I'm a wildlife photographer too. So for the red wing bird here, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 6 for mood and impact. The sharpness, it's sharp, but just like the last bird photo with the heron, you can tell there's quite a bit of noise in with the darkness, which means this image was shot with a very low exposure, very dark exposure. I don't say late at night because I could tell by the highlights on this bird that this was shot with a lot of natural light. So I think that the maker of this image likely underexposed the photo, or more likely cropped into the image a little bit too much. They might have taken this photo from far away, couldn't get any closer with their long lens, and decided to crop it in afterwards, which was a good idea to zoom into the subject, but technology can barely keep up with us half the time, so that's why we're getting a little bit of noise there. But the focus is still nice. The sharpness is good, so I'm going to give that a 2 out of 2 for sharpness. Light and exposure's technically perfect, so that is also getting a 6. Composition design, 6. Moon impact, 6. Cool. I'm going to give this image a 20 out of 20. I'm just like doling out these high scores because you guys earned it. I also like that this is really out of focus in the back. It really forces you to appreciate what's going on there. All right, you guys ready for the last photo of the nature category? Let's find out. Oh, it's got a lot of plastic on it. Okay, this image is titled Crossroads. Cool. So this is live judging with the Victoria Camera Club competition. I really like what I'm seeing here. So right away my eye goes to this mountain up here because it is so crisp, it's super sharp and in focus. And then it goes down here to this kind of like crossroads, as the title actually lets us know initially. What's cool about this image is the top half looks like a photograph. Like you come in, you can see the top half looks like a perfect photograph. But then the bottom, I don't know if you can see with the glare a little bit where you guys are looking at, but the bottom actually looks more illustrative. It's as if the maker painted the bottom half of this photo because of the way the hues are interacting with each other. I'm a big fan of that. It really adds an artistic quality. So I really like that. I'm also wondering what these little circles are. Is it ice? I mean, this is obviously very cold atmosphere. This looks like sheets of ice that have kind of like come in together. Or maybe there was like a riptide and it was so cold that they just kind of froze in place. Either way, I'm really appreciating the questions that this image poses. And is that horizon straight? It's hard to say. Yep. Straight horizon, which is really nice. I really love seeing that attention because so often you see things a little bit more crooked and you're distracted by how unrealistic that could be. And I really like this light that's hitting the mountaintop here and over here. It's a really nice time of day to capture this. So let's get to the judging on that. So light and exposure, perfectly exposed image. The darkest point is here and here, and you're still seeing detail in the depths of that darkness. The light points is this ice crust here and the clouds up here, and you're still seeing all the layers of detail of the wispiness of the clouds and the texture of the ice here. So perfect exposure. 6 out of 6 for that. So next up we have sharpness. And sharpness is really good, for sure, especially when viewed at the distance required back here. I know, it is a great photo, totally. The maker should be very proud of themselves. I'm gonna give that a 2 out of 2 for sharpness. Composition design, I love it. I think it was a really good decision for them to get both these elements in the frame. They kind of play off each other in the symbiotic relationship. So 6 out of 6 for mood and impact, and 6 out of 6 for composition and design, which means that Crossroads has earned 20 out of 20. Yay, good job. I love seeing this stuff. These photos make me want to get out of my office. Okay, on to the last category, which is the advanced monochrome prints. The first photo in the Victoria Camera Club's competition for Advanced Monochrome category is titled Steps and Pillars. I haven't seen any of these yet, guys, so I just looked at the title for the first time with you. So I'm anticipating something like Castle, Roman Cathedral, maybe the back end of the legislature building. Let's find out. Boom! Back end legislature. That's because that's like one of the #1 wedding spots. Cool, but I have not seen it photographed like this before. Normally you see it all from the front or all from the side. You don't generally see it from this 3/4 perspective and only a piece of it, which is quite cool. I really appreciate the time of day that the maker chose to take this image. Oftentimes in Victoria and on the island we get this really overcast light as it is outside right now. Great for viewing things in even daylight balanced light tones, and great for skin tones because I look amazing, if I do say so. But not the best for showing detail and architecture and structure. So by choosing to shoot this image at dawn or dusk, aka the golden hour, you're really getting that attention to the detail, making it pop, because everything is communicated with shadows and highlights. So the more you can contrast those naturally in camera, the better your message can be conveyed. So really good idea, but also very hard to wield because the highlights are so light and the darks become so dark with that kind of lighting. So the first thing my eyes go to is this area here because it's the brightest part of the image. It's almost clipped, like it's almost so white that there's no detail left, but not quite. I would like to see the maker of this photo kind of burn this area down a little bit, just this one, maybe a little bit up here and a little bit over here, so that the eye can continue to bounce in this direction without getting kind of like halted and stuck on the brighter areas of the image. And the darkness here, that's quite dark as well. So if you just want to even out this area, I think that will do some favors, especially because the stonework there is quite beautiful. I like that I can see the fence, the little gate over here is cool. And in the shadows here, you can still see all the detail, which is like a sign of a masterful exposure. So light and exposure is very good. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 6 for the reasons that I've described with the bright and dark. But I do love the overall starkness of the image. The commitment to contrast is really nice to see. So I am going to give it a 5 out of 6 for exposure, which I think is a really good grade because this environment is very difficult to photograph. So 5 out of 6 should be very proud of yourself for being able to get an exposure so unified. Just that one spot needs a little tweak. Sharpness looks perfect. It's not a very shallow depth of field, so you can even see the detail up here in these pillars, which is quite nice. So 2 out of 2 for sharpness. Cool. Mood impact, I think it's excellent. I'm really getting a sense of place here. Makes me very like patriotic and all that for my government town. So I'm gonna give that a 6 out of 6. Also, I have to say, I love that these lines are straight. This is something that the Victoria Camera Club has not failed on yet, and that's straight lines and straight horizons. And you'd be surprised how not common that is among, photography enthusiasts, hobbyists, professionals even. So here, the author of this photo either took it with a wide lens and then fixed the distortion afterwards in Lightroom, or they went a bit far away, used their actual feet, got a long lens and shot this without with a lot of compression and not a lot of distortion, which makes these lines nice and straight. Even when I personally shoot with a long lens, I still like fix the lines afterwards with the kind of like distortion adjustment in Lightroom. It really helps. So this image gets a 19 out of 20. Really good job to the maker of this one. Okay, next photo in the monochrome category. This image is called Patterns. Cool. This is a really unique image. Just gonna take a second to make some opinions and to really experience the difference of this photo. So if you zoom in, you can see that it's had some treatments done to it that make it look almost like an illustration. If I were to guess, it looks like a few layers of high pass filter and some sharpening, as well as of course desaturating because we're in the monochrome category, and lots of contrast as well. Some kind of high pass filter. So what a high pass filter does is it finds the edges of an image and it makes them more contrasting and dynamic, making something look like a cartoon or more illustrated than it is. So let's judge this print. The lines are a little bit crooked, but I think it's supposed to be kind of whimsical like that. That's the impression that I'm getting. So, for light and exposure, we'll start with that. For light and exposure, the whites are pure white and the blacks are pure black. So technically this image is too contrasty, but I don't think it's trying to be an image like any other image. It's going for something very like avant-garde-y. So for light and exposure, I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 6 because I appreciate the maker pushing the boundaries of what photography can actually be. And sharpness, everything is super sharp. It's hard to see actually what the initial focus was here because it's been so sharpened afterwards. I would like to see a little more sharpness on these guys down here though, and this tree up here. The sharpest thing here are these straight lines of these guys, but I don't know if that's how it's meant to be. It is super sharp though, so we'll give it a 2 out of 2 for sharpness. Composition design, I like it. I think it's really cool. You got some repetition with the stairs. Repetition is one of the compositional elements. Then you have leading lines everywhere, which is a definite compositional element that's very popular. So I'm gonna give that a 6 out of 6. And then for the overall mood and impact, it does make you ask questions as the viewer, which I enjoy. At the same time, I'm not sure if it makes me feel anything or makes me like empathize with the sort of mood. I'm kind of confused exactly about what the message is, but I enjoy it. So I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 6. Overall, I just want to say that it's pleasing to see an image that is unique and pushing the boundaries of what photography genre is. I love illustrations and photography mixed, and I'm really liking this image, especially from far away. I think it could really make a room. It's a great conversation piece. So the final score for this image is going to be 18 out of 20. So good job to the author of Patterns. Okay, next print in the Victoria Camera Club competition judging is going to be Okay, for those of you just tuned in, I'm Kelsey Goodwin, coming at you live, judging the Victoria Camera Club competition. We're about halfway through the monochrome advanced category, and this image is called Simone. It looks to be a very nice portrait of a woman who I presume to be named Simone. So let's check it out. The first thing I look at is her eyes, of course. You're really getting zoomed into that, and you feel like you know her a little bit. Maybe she's looking right at you. And then you have this really beautiful curl coming down. And then I'm looking at this because this is super sharp here, and the texture is very evident and pleasing. So let's get to scoring the image. Light and exposure. It's very well exposed. The highlights are not blown out and the shadows are not super, super dark, so it has a very nice even exposure. I would like to see this image even pushed a little bit more with the exposures. Those whites could be a little bit brighter and the darks could be a little bit darker. Like on the screen here, it looks a little bit more contrasty than it is in real life. What happens when you have so much the same tone in one image, it tends to look a tad muddy. So I would encourage the maker to push this image a little bit more in Lightroom or Photoshop to see if they like the contrasty look better. Just a creative suggestion, but the exposure is really well done. I'm giving it a 6 out of 6. Sharpness. So the sharpness, it looks the sharpest right here in this texture and not super sharp on the eyes. And classically, we'd like the sharpest point of the image to be on a subject's eyes, especially when they're in the rule of thirds or in the middle, looking directly at us. So I'm going to give this a 1 out of 2 for sharpness, because I think they just missed the mark. Very, very common, especially with the shallow depth of field like this person is using here. So 1 out of 2 for that. And composition design. She's kind of in the middle, but also kind of in rule of thirds. Sometimes it doesn't work for an image and sometimes it does. In this case, I'm going to say that it is working for the photo because we've got such a heavy part of the hood on this side and we've got some space where her face is about to turn or turn towards us, which is nice. I like the composition. I think it's nice. I would encourage the maker to experiment a little bit if they wanted to put it directly in the center or if they wanted to put her more in the rule of thirds. So they would crop it so that her eye was more over here, or if they had enough image around it to move it all the way over here. But I think the design is really quite nice. I'm giving that a 6 out of 6. And the mood and impact. When someone's making direct eye contact with you, it kind of like, it makes you kind of drawn into that person and appreciating what kind of vibe they have. She looks very friendly, polite. They might have just had a nice conversation. It's hard to believe that this could be a stranger. So I'm going to give this a 6 out of 6. Which means Simone gets 19 out of 20 as the final score. So good job to the author of this portrait. Ooh, I have a feeling I'm going to like this next one. The next print is titled Salt Spring Morning. And if you're a fan of the island and you've been to Salt Spring, you know why I'm excited. Let's check it out. Cool. Very interesting. It's not what I expected because mostly Salt Spring is like this light and airy kind of like fairy place. So this kind of darker take on it is unique. So the first thing I'm noticing is the nice straight horizon. Like I said, Victoria Camera Club really gets the distortion and the lines very correct, which I appreciate. And then there's a dude down here. So my eye goes to the dude. And he's wearing like a jacket with like the poofiness, you know, the poofy jackets that are really popular now. It's hard to see on your screen, but you can see all the detail in there. So you know the exposure is welcoming all the detail in the shadows and in the highlights. The weather looks really interesting here because at the top you've got this really dark cloud with like what looks like some like light rays or something's happening there, which is quite cool. Okay, let's start to grade this image and we'll go into detail about what's going on. Okay, Salt Spring Island morning. So for the mood impact, I really like it. It's not often that you see a person included in a landscape. There's nothing wrong with having a personless landscape, but humans tend to really like to share with each other and interact with each other. So I enjoy that aspect of this difference in this landscape here. So that's really nice. The impact is really cool. You're thinking it's a bit foreboding. You wonder what that guy's doing there. Is, you know, has the apocalypse happened? Probably not, because the title is Salt Spring Morning. So it's very calming. It's meant to be tranquil, just with like a darker edit. Very cool. I'm going to give this a 6 out of 6 for mood and impact. The composition design is very nice. Nice straight lines here. And then you have the trees doing a nice natural framing element. If these trees weren't on this side, you'd bounce this way, but it's always nicer to have the eye being guided back in a circle or into triangles. Triangles are very popular. That's why this pose is really common and exciting in fashion. Even though I call it the Sears catalog arm because it's a little bit dated now. But back to the print. So, great composition design elements. Really like that. I'm going to give that a 6 out of 6. The sharpness. There's been a lot of work done to this image. There's quite a bit of noise there. So this was either shot with a noisy actual film or, more likely, without a lot of natural light available. So they've had to brighten the image afterwards, which has caused the noise to come out and be evident in the darker areas. It does look like it has been sharpened as well. Down here is quite sharp. This dude here is sharp. Out there is sharp. So just like a typical landscape image, I could see this image being photographed at an aperture of f/22, maybe to get everything in focus for a very long depth of field. Another reason to support my suspicions of it being a very long aperture, aside from everything being in focus, is these tiny little lens spots that I'm finding. Well, there's a couple here in the clouds, there's one here, there's a couple other ones as well. This is something that actually plagues me as well. So it's quite alarming and dangerous sometimes to clean your own camera sensor. But what happens when you don't clean your sensor is that you get those little dots that are more apparent in areas of blankness like a sky. Most of the time we don't notice that our sensors need cleaning because we're shooting at such a shallow depth of field. But in cases like this where you want to get everything in focus, what happens is we forget that when we get the depth of field focus behind the subject, there's a smaller depth of field section that's actually zooming up towards us as well. So when we're shooting very long, we're actually going to get everything in focus right up to our lens, including all the stuff that's stuck on there. And that's why you end up with those very subtle but noticeable lens spots. One way to eliminate that, of course, is to clean your sensor. And if that frightens you, you should go to a professional to get it taken care of. Another way to take care of that is to go into your Lightroom and you click on the spot removal tool. And on the lower left, it says visualize spots. You click on that and you'll see all the spots very clearly. You can just take the spot removal tool and boom, 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 just like pepper those guys out of there. So I'm gonna give this a 1 out of 2 for sharpness, just because technically the spots are still there and a little bit distracting. Probably only noticeable to the discerning eye though. Cool, and then light and exposure, really nice exposure. I like that you can see the detail and everything. The detail in the guy's jacket I don't think is entirely necessary. I think it's great that you decided to include it, but maybe encouraging to see what would look like with a full silhouette, just to see what would happen. But I'm gonna give that a 6 out of 6 for a total of 19 out of 20 for this image, titled Salt Spring Morning. Kind of makes me wanna go back to Salt Spring Island in the summertime for sure. All right, next print in the judging. There's lots of plastic, so I gotta take a second to put this on. Take this off, I mean. Okay, this print is called Abandoned Dreams. Ooh, should we be a little bit afraid right now? Let's find out. Cool. This is the type of title and image combination that really makes you feel like you can relate to the message here. It's titled Abandoned Dreams, and it's got this like decrepit, clearly falling apart cabin. And I'm not sure if this is like a lake or a field. There's lots of texture in it, so I think it might be a field. But this could have been someone's like retirement home. Maybe like they started a craft farmer's market business and it didn't go well. Either way, pretty sad. Also, I just noticed that the live app on Instagram is only giving me 10 seconds left. So I'm gonna end this and restart it. We've got about 6 more prints left for the judging competition, so stick around. Hey guys, you're the real recording down here. Sorry that I've been decapitated this whole time. Hi guys, and we're back into live judging because I got cut off there with my last recording. But for those of you tuning in, we are back with the Victoria Camera Club live judging competition. We're seeing lots of cool prints. There's only about 6 or so left in the competition, and I'll explain to you exactly how we're judging this image. We're judging based on lighting and exposure, sharpness, composition and design, and the mood and impact of the photo out of 20. So this image is titled Abandoned Dreams. Very cool. So what we're looking at here is a decrepit cabin that's clearly abandoned, no one lives there, all that good stuff. For those of you joining in, this is the Victoria Camera Club's competition. I'm a volunteer judge and I decided to do it live. So check it out. So number 1, we're going to judge this image on light and exposure. So Broken Dreams, let's see. Number 1 thing, I'm going to look for the brightest part of the image, which is right up here on the roof and in the sky. I'm still seeing some detail in the highlights, which is really nice. It's a sign of a really good exposure when the details aren't completely blown out or clipped. The dark areas are not completely dark either. This side of the chimney here is, you can still see the brick detail, which is a good sign. So I'm going to give that a 6 out of 6 for light and exposure. The next is sharpness. What I like about the image is that it looks like it is sharpened, but it's not overly sharpened. So often you see images that are sharpened more than is required, and it creates a little bit of artifacting. And artifacting is just like extra pixels that don't need to be there, that take away from the quality of the image. So it's really nice to see that the sharpness is just kind of exactly the right amount. And behind it, you don't have a ton of sharpness in the landscape. That's a personal preference, nothing wrong with keeping it completely in focus as typical landscape portraits are. But because that's a typical landscape portrait, the fact that they chose a shallow depth of field makes this landscape a little more interesting, more focused on the cabin, which is nice. If anyone has any questions, feel free to post it and I'll do my best to answer. So for sharpness, I'm going to give that a 2 out of 2. The next up is composition and design. Right away we're seeing that this is not in the center, it's more off-center, like the rule of thirds, which is nice. I like that, it's a pleasing element. I like these layers of mountains, very repetitious with these leading lines, and nice straight horizon there, which you guys know that I like. I also like this tree over here. It's obvious that this house is abandoned, but then you go to this tree and it just kind of like heightens that feeling of no one lives here, no one cares to. So the title of Broken Dreams is actually helpful for this tree, and vice versa. So I'm going to give that a 6 out of 6 for mood and impact. Light and exposure is good, sharpness is good. So overall, this image is getting a 20 out of 20. Perfect score. Congratulations to the maker of this photo. All right, we've got about 5 more images left in the judging. This is from the Victoria Camera Club competition. Always fun to volunteer to see what local photographers are coming up with. We're on to the monochrome category, which means everything will be black and white. Okay, this image is titled Duck Feathers. Lots of ducks, lots of bird watching going on in this club here. That's cool. It's funny because this is a duck, clearly, but the way it's shot, it's almost like an eagle. Like normally you don't see kind of like poultry birds photographed in such an intense way. So I kind of like this composition for, such a basic bird. Basic bird, that should be a new hashtag. They'll drink Starbucks coffee and wear Uggs and such, if that's a thing still. So let's look at light and exposure. The exposure is really nice. The darks are not blown out. The whites are not clipped. The lightest part is on the beak here. It actually looks pretty good. And then you've got this like kind of blurry flare here going on. I'm not sure if that's a result of the light or a result of a post-production technique. I think it's a result of post-production. Sharpness is really good. It's definitely been sharpened quite a bit. It's extremely sharp here. But I think it might be over-sharpened as well. You can see a lot of artifacting happening throughout the beak area and down here. Furthermore, we've got this strange kind of blur, like Gaussian blur effect down there, which takes away from the sharpness aspect. I'd like to see the maker of this photo decrease the sharpness a little bit to maintain the quality of this photo without the artifacting involved here. Could be from a high pass filter or just regular unsharp mask. Things like that. So, to score it, the mood and impact, 6 out of 6. Really great job on the duck feather shot. And sharpening, I'm going to give that a 1 out of 2, just because I think it's just a little bit overdone. It almost looks like an illustration. Composition design, I really love the way this is framed, very intense for a duck. For many years, my phone ringer was a duck, so a duck quacking. So I have an extra appreciation for ducks. Only because every time I walk through a park, I thought that my phone was ringing off the hook. Turns out I'm not that popular. Okay, so 6 out of 6 for composition design, and 6 out of 6 for light and exposure, for a total of 19 out of 20 for the maker of this image. Good job. Next photo in the monochrome category. This image is titled Mountain Light. So I'm anticipating seeing some mountains and some light. Let's find out. What do you know? I must be completely psychic. This is a really epic image. Wish you guys get closer on this, but this up here is like this really cool like layers of mountains, and it's got some really epic like smoke coming through there. Very cool. And then we move over here and you got some like canyons, etc. I really like it. The first thing that comes to my mind randomly is, what's that quote about like walking through the valley of death? That's what comes to my mind. So I think the impact of the mood here is really nice. The lighting is extremely moody. It's coming in through here, through like a hole that the mountains have created, like a valley, and it's slicing right up here. So it's got a really sharp line. Really nice time of day for the maker to decide to take this photo, especially because the weather is also very moody. And no sign of any lens dust, so the sensor was actually very clean for such a crisp image. We see sharpness up here all the way to the back. Really nice sharpening on that, and no lens dust whatsoever. So that's really nice. Then down here you see this element of a winding road coming through here. And I love that for perspective, because now we're seeing the vastness of actually these mountainous ranges. Very cool. So let's get to grading it. Light and exposure is worth 6 points. And I'm looking at the highlights, which I'm getting a lot of detail in still, and the shadows have a lot of detail as well. So that's a 6 out of 6 for exposure for me. Sharpness is perfect, as far as I can tell. It's technically accurate. And very minimal noise in the image as well. So I'm going to give that a 2 out of 2. Composition and design, the maker could have easily moved it this way and missed this nice slope, but their eye is too good for that. They decided to include it as a nice natural frame for the eye to keep kind of circling around, which is a sign of good composition. Also, they kept the darkness of the top clouds here, or they added the darkness to the top clouds, still keeping the viewer kind of bouncing in and around and experiencing this photo. So really good job on composition and design. 6 out of 6 for you. Mood and impact is 6 out of 6 for a final mark of 20 out of 20, which is kind of what I suspected we'd end up with after initially experiencing this image. So good job for the maker of that photo. Only 2 prints left in the Victoria Camera Club competition. This is K Good Photo coming at you with some live judging. By 2 prints, I meant 3 prints. Okay, this image is called Barnacles. I wonder what we're gonna find. What do you know? That joke never gets old. All right, so we've got some barnacles, but definitely not in the way that I expected. You don't often see barnacles so artistic. You kind of look at them and you're worried to step on them and all this stuff, but here we're looking at them in a new light. We're really able to admire the design that goes into these. They also kind of look like little like alligator feet, kind of like pointed up. Really cool. So let's grade this. Light and exposure. So normally with light and exposure, you're looking at, you still want to see detail in the darks and detail in the lights as well. But with an image like this, they're obviously going for a very contrasted look, which you cannot always pull off classically. Of course, rules are meant to be broken. And here, that's what we're seeing. This black is as black as they come, and it works. It looks good. It looks like they may have cut it out and probably eliminated some background situations and distracting elements to make this more of an impactful image. Down here on the left, they still left some here. So I would like to see the maker in Photoshop go back into this little area and really black that out. Really commit to the decision that they made to make that completely a blank canvas in the back there. And don't worry about making it too dark, because we've got this great piece in the middle to keep us entertained. Are you not entertained? Yes, I am. And at the bottom here, we see this really nice anchored image. So technically, I would recommend doing that creatively. I'm not going to dock marks for that because it's subtle, and the rest of the image has a really nice impact. So for mood and impact, I'm giving it a 6 out of 6. For sharpness, it is very sharp. I think the foreground might be a little over sharpened. I'd like to see the focus remain on where the focus is and not try to extend the focus as an afterthought. That's just an estimate of mine. That's the impression that I'm getting. So I'm going to give this a 1 out of 2 for focus. It just seems a little artifacty down there. I prefer to see it naturally soft as it came out of camera for that situation. And then composition design, love it, 6 out of 6. Light and exposure, rules are meant to be broken, which gives this image a final mark of 19 out of 20. So really good job to the maker of this photo. We have 2 images left for the Victoria Camera Club judging. Oh, you're welcome, as I see it. If you're driving by, I'll see your car, by the way, because I'm creepy like that. I live in the same neighborhood. All right, so congrats to the barnacle maker. We're moving on to the next photo in the competition. This image is titled Lines Number 11. Not really sure what that means. I guess we'll find out after I take it out of the plastic. Oh, hey Tiff, what's up? You've just joined us for the final 2 images of the Victoria Camera Club competition judging that I'm volunteering to judge, and I thought I would do it live because I can. So, this is called Lines Number 11. Cool. I'm really liking the impact. And if you guys can't see that, it says Roger Tallis, liver number 11. Interesting. So that's where the maker was able to draw a title for this image from the writing on this little note here. I don't know if this Roger guy is waiting for a liver, or maybe he like got one to fry up with some onions or something, but you know, either way, very, very cool. It definitely provokes some questioning from the viewer, which is always a sign of a good image. Of the lines that are coming down here, looks like some kind of fishing net that's been wrapped up. Really cool. So let's get to judging. Light and exposure is our first category. Exposure is technically perfect. There's no blown out highlights in the lit areas, and in the darkness, it's not super dark. You can still see all the texture of the fishnet in the dark shadows there. So it's getting a 6 out of 6 for that. Sharpness, extremely sharp. Really good job. I'm looking at a lot of this stuff. And the cool thing about texture photos, guys, is that even if your focus is a little bit off or it's not tack sharp, oftentimes you can still fudge it a little bit because texture shows a lot of contrast, and contrast equals sharpness. So I'm going to give that a 2 out of 2 for sharpness. Composition and design is really quite nice. We've got this a little bit offset And then you've got this random element kind of like distracting you, but in a good way, because we've got a balancing element down here. So it's almost like symmetry between these two other elements, aside from the obvious texture happening. So I'm gonna give that a 6 out of 6. And the mood impact is interesting. I think without this, it wouldn't be as exciting for me as a viewer. I like it when there is a little bit of like clues as to what I'm looking at. And when I'm seeing something like this that gives me a little bit more information, I appreciate it. So I'm gonna give that a 6 out of 6 for mood and impact, which equals 20 out of 20 for the maker of this photo. And I would love to see you post a little story about this on social media so we can find out who Roger is. Okay, the name of this maker is not Roger, so that answers that question. All right, last print in the print judging competition. Let's check it out. This image is titled Harlech Castle. So I'm hoping for a castle here. Was not disappointed. Really, really cool. So the first thing I'm noticing is that this image has a very different treatment on it than most images do. It's an extremely noisy monochrome image. And if you ever want to embrace noise, monochrome is the safest way to go, because oftentimes you will get more noise in a black and white image, or it tends to suit it better anyway. It almost has this illustrative quality, and the focus is not quite sharp, especially in the back there. I'll show you what I mean. So you can see the focus in the back there has a little bit of either a handshake to it, a little bit of handshake, and potentially, I would say handshake. Although this is not as out of focus as that is. That looks like motion blur almost, whereas the foreground does not look like motion blur. Interesting image. Okay, let's get to judging. This is the last print in the competition. We're now judging out of 4 categories to give it a final score out of 20. So the first one is light and exposure. So the maker of this image has technically perfect exposure. There's no information that's missing in the highlights and the shadows. They both have lots of detail in them. So I'm going to give that a 6 out of 6 for exposure. Nice job. Sharpness. It's technically not sharp because of the motion blur or whatever that may be back there. So I'm actually going to give this a 1 out of 2 for sharpness. The composition and design is my favorite element of this image because we've got some really beautiful use of natural frames in the real world. So you've got this like archways here and then in there, and then we have symmetry with the arches on this side and on that side, and then you have repetition with it going again and again. So really nice use of natural frames and composition. So I'm giving this a 6 out of 6 for composition and design. And the mood and impact of the image, I like this. I think the mood is really cool. The lines are nice and straight. There's no distortion. It's kind of a grainy feeling to the castle. I'm going to give this a 5 out of 6 for mood and impact. Now the reason I didn't give it 6 out of 6 is just because I kind of get lost a little bit. I look at it and I'm thinking like, cool, I love the frames, I love the castle. But beyond that, I'm not sure where to look, because you want to look in the frame here, but when you look there, it's really blurred, so it's hard to know where your eye is supposed to anchor, and I'm unsatisfied when I go there. I'd be more satisfied if this was either tack sharp, or if there was a person there, or some kind of like subject element to really satisfy me. But overall, really, really great image. So this will get a total of 18 out of 20. Fantastic grade. And that concludes the Victoria Camera Club competition judging. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope that you learned a lot. If there's any questions, if the makers have any questions regarding their images, please feel free to reach out to me. My handles are KGoodPhoto on Facebook and all the other social medias because I have no identity outside of my business. Cool, thanks for tuning in, guys. Have a good day.